A full-time housewife has it easy, just staying at home and getting fed. As long as I work, there's no problem. Honestly, a full-time housewife is just a freeloader. I wish I could be one too. My husband, Sean, his face flushed from drinking, said this. In contrast, the faces of the relatives around us turned pale. Today, I was attending a gathering at my husband's family home, but I could only sigh at his behavior. I calmly said, without getting angry, Sean, I'm not a full-time housewife. I've been working since a month ago. What? What are you talking about? There's no way a slowpoke like you can work. Are you drunk? Don't underestimate the working world, Sean retorted. Though it was my husband who was drunk, I kept my composure despite my irritation. My husband knew nothing, but I knew everything. I had always gone along with what my husband said, but I planned to end that today. With quiet anger and determination, I turned to face my husband. Hearing Sean's outrageous comments, my in-laws sensed the tension and approached our table. Sean, what are you saying? Today is a gathering to celebrate Julia's new job. You knew that, didn't you? This dinner was actually a slightly belated celebration of my new job. I hadn't told my husband about the nature of this gathering. His expression changed, however, he still didn't believe that I was actually working. There's no way you could be working. Even if you were, it's not right that you haven't told me, the one who's been providing for you. That's not true, Sean. I really am working, I calmly rebutted. Unable to accept my words, Sean started boasting about himself. Listen, unlike you, I'm an elite employee at a big company with a high income. I'm trusted by my subordinates, superiors, and especially the president. I'm on the fast track to promotion. I'm the one earning the high income that supports us. If people know you're working, they'll think I'm not earning enough, so you don't need to work. If you're working behind my back, I won't tolerate it. What do you mean you won't tolerate it? What exactly will you do? Obviously, I'll kick out any freeloading woman who doesn't listen to me, and I won't give you any money. Then let me ask you this. Why is the money from your high-income job disappearing? Sean, who had been laughing, looked a bit troubled when I asked him calmly. He seemed confused by my unusual demeanor. At this point, my father-in-law, who had been listening, asked, What do you mean? Is it true that the money Sean earned is gone? Father-in-law, the truth is, our savings are completely gone. Even though Sean has a high income, there's no money left. This is one of the main reasons I started working. There's no money left in your savings? My father-in-law muttered in disbelief. Looking around, I saw that everyone who heard my words was stunned. It was natural, considering my husband claimed to have a high income, yet had no savings. However, just hearing my statement wasn't enough for them to be convinced. They were more confused. My husband still refused to believe me and accused me of being drunk again. What are you talking about? Are you drunk? You don't usually drink. Father, mother, don't believe what she's saying. Hiding his true nature, my husband acted as if he was exasperated. He probably thought he could talk his way out of anything I said. He clearly looked down on me, unaware that it would backfire on him. I took a deep breath and continued to explain. I haven't had any alcohol, and I'm not drunk. I've been serious from the beginning. You're the one who's been dismissing my words. Everything will be clear if you look at the joint account transactions. I opened the joint account transaction history and showed its contents to my in-laws and the gathered relatives. What are you doing? Sean stammered. Because the money you've been using is from our joint account. This account includes my savings from when I struggled to find a job after many failed attempts. You have no idea how hard I worked to save that money. I pointed out the recent transaction history as I rebutted. It showed large amounts of money being withdrawn. My father-in-law took the bank book and flipped through the pages, frowning. "What is this money for?" he asked. Well, it was necessary for company events. It was for an important project. Company events? There are months where you've spent $20,000. There's no way you'd need that much for company events or projects. My father-in-law's reasonable doubt and anger were evident. Caught off guard by it, my husband, looking panicked, tried to cover up with excuses. That month, there was significant client entertainment and project-related expenses. It was unavoidable. You say it was unavoidable, but using the money Julia worked so hard to save is too much. This makes me question your character. And there's almost no money left. What did you really spend all that money on? We need an explanation that makes sense. A grown man being scolded by his own parents, just like a grade schooler getting in trouble for spending all his allowance without planning. My husband refused to admit his wrongdoing. I've told you many times, the money was spent on work-related events and project expenses. Our company is about to launch a major project, Sean insisted. It's amazing how easily he could lie, I thought. I decided to reveal the truth. Father, mother, it's not like that. All this money, it was spent on his affair. Our savings are gone because he's been spending it on another woman. I finally exposed the truth. Sean hastily tried to counter. What nonsense are you talking about? My in-laws were already bewildered by his rebuttal. I continued without missing a beat. I have proof. Look at these photos. I showed my in-laws the photos on my smartphone. The screen displayed pictures of Sean with an unfamiliar woman. There were several photos of them entering high-end brand stores and restaurants. Why do you have these photos? And why were you spying on me? Do you think it's okay to do this? An affair? This is a ridiculous joke. These are just work-related events, not an affair. Sean yelled, his face turning red. He tried to hide his agitation, but sweat was forming on his forehead. Normally, I would have been intimidated, but not today. For work-related events, you seem to be having a lot of fun. Look at these photos. You look like a couple, I replied. Enough with the nonsense. I've told you it's not an affair. It's part of my job. She's just a colleague. You're wrong to assume it's an affair just from these photos. Sean snapped back at me, his face reddening even more. Did he think raising his voice would make me back down? As I stood there in disbelief, my father-in-law and mother-in-law spoke up, looking confused. This doesn't seem right. Anyone, even an outsider, would think it's an affair. It also explains why $20,000 disappeared in a month. And this restaurant in the photo, isn't it that famous high-end place that's booked 6 months in advance? And that wallet is a known brand worth over $6,000. Their tone shifted from confusion to anger, but Sean continued to deny the affair, making more excuses. This is part of our company's product development. We have tasting events and research competitors' products. It's tough in this competitive era. If that were true, all expenses should be covered by the company. Draining your shared savings seems personal, my father-in-law countered. There's a lot going on in the company. There are confidentiality obligations, so there are things I can't tell my family. The real issue here is her taking secret photos and accusing me of having an affair. Sean attacked me, still denying his infidelity. But I knew he was lying. The one clearly doing something wrong is you. Stop lying. You keep saying she's a colleague, but she isn't, is she? What? How would you know that? Are you saying you know all my colleagues? That's impossible. Don't make baseless accusations. You're right. I don't know your colleagues, but I know this woman isn't one of them. She's my colleague. I work at your client's company. Sean was stunned into silence. Yes, his mistress was an employee of his client, and I had started working at his client's company. The woman in the photos was not his colleague. No matter how many lies and excuses he made, he couldn't escape the truth. After a moment of silence, my husband responded, "What are you talking about? That's made-up nonsense." He was panicking, unable to accept reality. My in-laws and relatives were also visibly shaken, listening intently to my story. "I suspected your affair for a while. Our savings kept dwindling, and your behavior changed. Moreover, you started going out more often and stopped contributing money to the household." I knew something was wrong, I explained. I had asked someone to investigate his affair, and it turned out his mistress was an employee of his client company. Everyone was astonished that I had been acting behind the scenes. To my relatives, I was the quiet one, and it was hard for them to believe I could do something so bold. I had always had low self-esteem. I lacked the confidence to speak my mind. Repeated failures in job hunting had further eroded my confidence. That's why I had always gone along with my husband. But I was now determined. I took a deep breath and continued. "After discovering the affair, I decided to get a job at your client's company for revenge. I wanted to pressure you and your mistress. Despite my numerous job search failures, I got hired immediately this time. Anger is a powerful motivator. It made me realize I could achieve anything." I could clearly see the moment my husband's expression froze even more. He fell into a deeper panic and was at a loss for words. "It's Anna, isn't it? Your mistress's name. I know everything. There's no point in denying it. I've met Anna many times as a colleague. Of course, she doesn't know I'm your wife. How does that make you feel?" The moment I mentioned Anna's name, I saw the blood drain from my husband's face. There were murmurs of surprise among the relatives. Sean couldn't hide his panic and weakly countered, "So what? It's just a coincidence." Coincidence? No, Sean. As I said, I intentionally got a job at that company. I wanted to see with my own eyes how much you were deceiving me. I have the right to know everything. I've heard about you from Anna, too. His words had lost all power. He was so panicked that his mind seemed scrambled. My in-laws and relatives wore expressions of disappointment. It was no wonder, given that his affair had been confirmed right before their eyes. I began to suspect the affair when Sean started to change and mistreat me. Relatives, think back when he was drunk. Didn't he say, "Honestly, a full-time housewife is just a freeloader"? That wasn't just the alcohol talking. He said it all the time. He also called me a parasite living off him. At these words, my husband finally hung his head. The gazes from my in-laws and relatives grew colder and colder. When we first got married, Sean was gentlemanly and kind. I didn't realize he was such a jerk. After we got married, he started showing his true colors, hurling abusive words whenever something displeased him. Whenever I complained even a little, he threatened me with divorce. You may not know this, but I always cried alone. I noticed my tone was getting heated, so I took a deep breath to calm myself. One day, this life continued, and you started going out more and spending money without telling me. You also stopped contributing to the household funds. When your behavior started changing, I began to suspect an affair. You took advantage of my inability to respond, trying to control me. But it's all over today. As everything became clear, the room fell into a heavy silence. Breaking the silence, my father-in-law stood up and addressed Sean. "Sean, what have you been doing? Not only an affair, but also mistreating your wife and covering it up with lies and excuses. Do you have any idea how wrong this is? Yes, do you realize how terrible your actions are? It's embarrassing for a grown man to behave this way." Sean just hung his head, unable to say anything. In the heavy atmosphere of the room, Sean continued to remain silent. I addressed the relatives. Sean told me I was underestimating society, but who was actually underestimating society? My in-laws also bowed their heads in shame, their faces turning red. The answer was obvious. There was no need to spell it out. To drive the point home, I presented the evidence of the affair I had obtained from the detective agency. The atmosphere grew even heavier. Sean finally began to grasp the gravity of the situation and tried to explain. Wait a minute, this is a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? You've been lying all this time. It's too late to say anything now. Your words have already lost their power. No one will believe you. The relatives all nodded in agreement. Facing their cold stares, Sean began to sweat and slumped in defeat. Silence fell again, and then my in-laws deeply bowed their heads and apologized to me. We're truly sorry for what our son has done. We'll make sure he takes responsibility. If we had noticed earlier, this might not have happened. We're so sorry, Julia. Their emotions were a mess of anger, sadness, and shame, but they didn't need to apologize. Everything was due to my husband's character. I immediately took the next step. Since the affair is confirmed, I need you to sign the divorce papers. I'll also be claiming alimony. If you have any complaints, talk to this lawyer. You'll be contacted soon. I'll be returning to my parents' house. I calmly conveyed the necessary information to Sean without showing any emotion. I realized my words lacked any humanity. Right after I finished speaking, Sean snapped and lunged at me. He grabbed me by the collar, but my father-in-law seized Sean's hand. Ouch, it hurts, it hurts. My father-in-law had practiced martial arts, including judo, since his school days. As I later learned, the reason Sean let go of me so quickly was that my father-in-law had applied a joint lock on Sean's wrist. For my father-in-law, twisting his son's hand was as easy as twisting a baby's. And then the next moment, I witnessed an unbelievable scene. You fool. My father-in-law punched Sean in the face. My relatives and I were stunned into silence. It was like watching a drama where a father hit his high school son who is straying off the right path. Seeing a grown man get punched by his father was utterly pathetic. Sean was writhing on the floor, making pitiful noises. Seeing him like this made me feel truly ashamed for having been with such a loser. Julia, we're truly sorry. There's no excuse for this, but we also bear responsibility for raising such a foolish son. Where did we go wrong in raising him? We're really sorry. My in-laws bowed deeply, pressing their heads to the floor in apology. Next to them, Sean was being forced into a bow by his father, who had grabbed his head. It was like a child being scolded for mischief. This was fitting for a man who couldn't distinguish between right and wrong. He always bragged about being an elite. How pathetic. Right after the bow, Sean pushed his father's hand away, stood up, and began to rant. Listen up, unlike you all, I'm an exceptional person. That's why I can do whatever I want. No one paid attention to the man who spent $20,000 in a month, but Sean didn't stop, continuing his tirade. Father, mother, and Julia, how much do you make a month? Not as much as me, right? Of course not. Losers like you can't compete with me. Anna is just as exceptional as I am. That's why I'll leave Julia and marry her. Quit whining about a little affair. Disown me if you want. I can live on my own. You must be very confident, Mr. Elite, but are you sure you won't regret saying all this? Regret? No way, idiot. Let me tell you this clearly. You're like my slave. I married you because you were weak. I thought I could control you with a bit of kindness. Don't dare to defy me. You'll regret it. Sean laughed loudly, and I was left in utter disbelief. He was beyond redemption as a person. Moreover, he had no idea what was coming. I prepared to deliver my final blow. Sean, there's one more important thing I need to tell everyone. Sean's crazy defiance turned into a tense expression at my words. My in-laws and relatives watched me, wondering what would happen next. His mistress, Anna, is actually someone very important. She's the daughter of your company's president. The room erupted in gasps of surprise. Sean's face changed, and he looked at me in sudden realization. What nonsense is this? Anna never mentioned she was the president's daughter. Of course she didn't. Anna wants to succeed on her own without relying on her father's influence. She's kept her identity a secret. My father-in-law asked, "But how do you know such an important detail, Julia?" I heard it directly from Anna. We became close after talking about our shared hobbies. Of course, I approached her with a plan in mind. One day, during our usual chat, Anna shared her dream of succeeding without her father's help. My in-laws and relatives listened, now understanding. Sean's face was filled with despair. I delivered the final blow. I will report your affair to your company's president. I don't know how highly you're regarded at work, but all your trust and status will crumble. And I also know you lied to Anna, saying you were single. Imagine the fallout from deceiving the president's daughter. Immediately, Sean panicked and finally began to beg for mercy. He seemed terrified of losing everything he had built up, but I showed no mercy. I intended to expose not only his affair, but also his true nature. That would surely end the relationship between him and Anna. He had said, "I'll never regret this," but I would make sure he regretted it deeply. I had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Wait, Julia, I was wrong. I admit everything. I'll apologize. Just please forgive me. I didn't know anything. Please don't report this to the president. Sean, do you think an apology will fix everything? Your affair, your treatment of me, how many people do you think have been hurt? Even if you apologize, your actions and words won't disappear immediately. Unfortunately, it's already too late, I told him calmly, as if looking at something filthy. Sean, flustered, begged my in-laws and relatives for help, but they all stood by my side. "Father, Mother, please help me. If I lose my job, I can't survive. I won't be able to pay alimony." Sean cried and pleaded, but my in-laws coldly pushed him away. "Sean, now you understand how wrong you've been. We can't stay by your side any longer. From now on, we are severing all ties. You're disowned. Never show your face to us again," my father-in-law spoke sternly. "Crying and relying on your parents, how pathetic. Instead, pay Julia the alimony and atone for your sins properly." I quietly stood up from where my husband lay crying and bowing his head to the floor and walked out of the room. Sean, surrounded by relatives, tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He could only watch my back as I left. "This is the end, Sean. There's nothing left between us. I'm going to live a new life." My relatives expressed their support for my decision with sympathetic looks. In the end, Sean lost everything, and I gained my freedom. Months passed, and my life changed drastically. After divorcing Sean, I gained my freedom and embraced a new beginning. I accepted my in-laws' apologies, which deepened our relationship and became a source of support for me. Starting my new life, I finally realized what I truly wanted: freedom, self-respect, and time with loved ones. I cherished these newfound values. One day, my in-laws visited me. They began to talk about Sean's current situation. Sean had lost the trust of his company, and his position deteriorated, eventually leading him to resign voluntarily. Mentally broken, he couldn't find a new job and became a recluse. He had broken up with his mistress and was now living a lonely life. He was a far cry from the person who once proclaimed himself to be an exceptional man. Sean has lost everything and deeply regrets it now. I think it was a good lesson for him. I expressed my gratitude to my in-laws and shared my resolution. I won't look back at the past anymore. I'll focus on living in the present. After that, I became active in my local community, spending time meeting new friends and pursuing hobbies. One day, I met someone by chance with whom I felt a deep connection, and eventually, we got remarried. My new husband was understanding, and we built a relationship based on mutual respect. Now, I feel a sense of peace and satisfaction that I never had in the past. Not everything that happens in life can be fully understood, but with time, the meaning often becomes clear. Perhaps my marriage to Sean was part of that journey. I had always lacked confidence in myself, but it's up to me to shape my own life. I want to cherish myself and walk forward into my new life.